Well, today is day 112 in our journey through the Word. And again, we see in yesterday's reading, at the conclusion of yesterday's reading, the death of Saul and all the events around that. And we pick up today where we start where it says that all the tribes of Israel went to David at Hebron and told him, and the Lord told you, you will be the shepherd of my people Israel. You will be Israel's leader. And so a unified front of the people of Israel have now come to David. He has moved from a single man hiding in a cave, hiding in the fields, fearing for his life. He is now to take the place, take the role, take the position that God had anointed him years before. The fleeing and the fear of Saul and Saul's men and the loyalty of Saul's men and the people has now changed that Saul is dead and his sons are dead. And now they have come to David and said, God had said, you will be our leader. I thought that was interesting that it took those events before the people would come to David and admit that God had anointed him as king. But he has moved from hiding in a cave to an army where we see today. And I'm just trying to wrap my mind around this. There's an army standing there of more than 330,000 or 337,000 men dressed in their battle attire, standing before David with a single mind to make David their king. And I again just trying to wrap my mind around how many people and what that would look like. 337,100 men stood before David. And they were there with a unified, that many men, with a unified heart, a unified mind, a unified intent. They all supported David as their king. What a great picture of just God's faithfulness and David's faithfulness to God and claiming God's promises and continuing to cry out in his difficult times, in his fears. But also we see even some points of humility today when David is anointed king. But there's the passage out of 2 Samuel 5:24 that is my key passage for today, and I just wrote at the top, listen carefully. And I love this passage because it says, when you hear a sound like marching feet in the top of the poplar trees, be on the alert. That will be the signal that the Lord is moving ahead of you to strike down the Philistine army. When you hear a sound like marching feet in the top of the trees, that is God moving before you. And I just had to think, do I not stop and listen carefully? Is God giving me those signs? And am I missing them? Listen carefully. I was reminded that God does not need us to fight his battles. We just need to be willing to be used as God calls us. And God told David, don't go until you've heard me go before you. God wants us to listen. We might be amazed at what we hear if we just stopped and listened. And I will say I'm the guiltiest of them all, that I don't stop and listen. My mind starts to race and just takes off again. But God tells us, be still and know that I am God. We also see in today the disobedience has consequences. We saw that in the life of Uzzah, who was one of the men who was riding on the new cart. And I had to wonder, and maybe we'll get some more details as we continue to read, why did David use a new cart to carry the ark as he was trying to transport the ark into the city of David? God had already said that it was to be carried by the priest. And we don't know that Uzzah was or was not a priest. There's not an indication that he was. But what we do know is in his disobedience, when the ox stumbled, he reached out to steady the ark. Intent was good, but it was not his to touch. And I had to wonder, it said that in the passage where it says David said, if God wills for us to move this, but it doesn't reference in our reading today that David ever went before the Lord and asked him if this is what he desired. Maybe that too was a reason that we saw the punishment for disobedience. Why was the ark placed on the cart? Again, I hope maybe in the days ahead that we can get some answers, but I think even tomorrow we'll see that he does it again. But this time, David goes before the Lord, and he asks about bringing the ark to the city of David. He follows his instructions. I'm reminded as we conclude another week is don't make all my plans and then ask God for his blessings. I need to begin with God and ask him, because his will should be first and then mine. Because his will, a good chance, is not my will, but his will is always the right will. I hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you again Monday as we continue our journey through the Word.